Hello, family. Enjoy this great relaxing moment with Afri Stories. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and comment. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and do not miss future videos from us. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Olivia Saunders tapped her pencil against the edge of her desk, gaze drifting toward the city skyline. She couldn't shake off the suspicion that her husband, Richard, had become distant. They'd been married for 7 years, weathering challenges, but something felt different now. That morning, he'd left early, claiming a sudden meeting with a vital client. Friends had noticed his distant glances, abrupt phone calls, and messages he swiftly deleted. Olivia tried to ignore their warnings, but a knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She gazed at their wedding photo, recalling promises once made. Janine, her loyal assistant, entered quietly with a schedule. Olivia forced a smile, yet thoughts of Richard filled her mind. He had always been attentive, even during hectic times. Why had he grown so secretive? Later, she noticed an email from an old friend. Urgent. Spotting Richard with someone. Her heart hammered reading it. It confirmed that Richard had been seen at an upscale restaurant with a blonde woman, looking intimate. The email included a timestamp that matched the night. He claimed he was working late. She wanted to dismiss it as a misunderstanding, but his recent behavior fed her worst suspicions. She closed her laptop in haste, considering possible explanations. A client? A colleague? Yet the secrecy around his calls made the painful explanation loom large. That evening, she decided to confront him. Arriving home early, she found the house quiet. Eventually, Richard stepped in, shrugging off his jacket with a weary sigh. "How was your meeting?" she asked, heart thumping. "It was fine," he answered, avoiding her eyes. Summoning courage, she asked, "Who's the blonde woman you were seen with yesterday?" He froze momentarily, then exhaled heavily. "It's complicated. Work has been stressful. She's just a friend." Olivia's stomach twisted. "Why didn't you mention it?" she pressed, hurt sharpening her voice. He turned away. "I'm tired," he snapped, heading for the bedroom. "We'll talk later." In the days that followed, Olivia felt her world slipping. Whenever she tried to speak to him, he deflected her concerns. He guarded his phone, offered vague excuses, and brushed off her questions. Each denial eroded her peace, leaving her restless at night. At work, she tried to focus, but worry shadowed her. During a coffee break, Janine approached. "You seem off," her assistant said gently. "I'm here if you need anything." Olivia hesitated, then confided, "I think Richard's lying to me. I don't know what to do." Janine squeezed her hand in silent support. One evening, as she worked late, a friend called from an exclusive restaurant. She'd seen Richard holding hands with the same blonde woman, acting more than friendly. Olivia's heart sank. The confirmation of his affair felt like a physical blow. This sealed her suspicions. Tears blurred her vision. She knew she couldn't pretend anymore. The next day, she confronted Richard again, determined to draw out the truth. He turned defensive. "I'm under pressure," he snapped. "You wouldn't understand." When she demanded specifics, he grew agitated, storming out of the room. Their arguments escalated. Olivia once believed their bond was unbreakable, but now she felt him slipping away. In dark moments, she questioned her own worth. However, an ember of anger reminded her she deserved honesty, not half-truths. Desperate for answers, she examined phone records and suspicious receipts. Lavish dinners, hotel stays, expensive gifts. One receipt for an extravagant necklace purchased during one of his late meetings was the final blow. The date matched the weekend. He claimed to be on a business trip. Confronting him with the evidence, she demanded answers. Cornered, he admitted he'd been seeing someone else. "I'm sorry," he said, though his tone rang hollow. "I never wanted to hurt you." Olivia stood there, numb, fury warred with heartbreak. She wanted to shout or weep, but she remained silent. In that moment, she sensed a chapter of her life ending. The man she once trusted had shattered her illusions. Emotions surging, she left the house. The ring on her finger felt like a mockery of love. She clutched the steering wheel, tears streaming, until she pulled into a deserted parking lot. City lights shimmered like distant beacons. Inside her, chaos reigned. She thought of calling a friend, but shame and sorrow paralyzed her. She needed to find a way forward. Richard's betrayal stung, but she refused to be defined by it. If he couldn't offer loyalty, she would forge a path alone. That realization gave her a fragile sense of resolve. She remembered a conversation with her mother long ago. Strength isn't about never breaking. It's about rebuilding after you do. With trembling hands, she dialed an attorney's number. The act felt monumental, as though she seized control of her destiny. If the marriage was truly over, she wouldn't let his infidelity break her spirit. Little did she know that fate would soon intervene in a way she never expected. The darkness enveloping her heart would gradually lift, leading her towards someone who saw her worth, a man prepared to protect her bruised heart and restore the light she feared lost. Olivia awoke with a heavy heart, the reality of Richard's betrayal now impossible to ignore. She'd spent the night on the living room couch, drifting in and out of restless sleep. Morning light offered little comfort as she forced herself to dress for work, try and project the composure required of her position. At the office, Janine greeted her with gentle concern. "How are you holding up?" "Managing," Olivia murmured. "What's on my schedule?" She buried herself in tasks, moving from phone calls to budget reviews. The attorney's voice on the previous day echoed in her thoughts. Divorce proceedings would be complicated but necessary. Despite the turmoil, she clung to her responsibilities. The philanthropic organization she helped lead was pursuing new partnerships to fund vital community projects. Late in the morning, Janine informed her that the Prescott Foundation had arrived. Olivia squared her shoulders and entered the conference room. Alongside Mr. Prescott stood Lucas Harrington, a renowned CEO in the tech world. Though she had read about his brilliance, she was unprepared for his quiet intensity. They discussed strategies to bolster educational grants and support underserved neighborhoods. Olivia tried to focus, but her mind drifted to the upheaval at home. She caught Lucas studying her with calm but observant eyes. When the meeting ended, he lingered. "You seem a bit preoccupied," he said gently. "Is everything all right?" Her pulse quickened. "I'm fine," she managed, forcing a small smile. Lucas nodded without pressing further. "If you need anything, just say the word. I admire your dedication." She thanked him, unsettled by how easy he perceived her distress. She'd grown adept at hiding it, but something about him made her feel exposed. That afternoon, she received a call from her attorney outlining the next steps for the divorce. Hearing the clinical details felt surreal. Arriving home that evening, she found Richard apologetic, promising to fix things. Yet she couldn't forget his months of deceit. She spent another sleepless night on the couch. Over the next few days, she forced herself to push forward, though nights were still haunted by betrayal. The attorney scheduled meetings, and each step confirmed her marriage was ending. Work became her refuge. She finalized proposals, managed staff, and exchanged emails with Lucas regarding funding opportunities. His messages were thorough, yet quietly reassuring. One afternoon, he requested a brief meeting to explore an additional grant source. They met at a cafe near her office. A cozy corner table offered them privacy. Warm light reflected off polished wood, giving the space a truly welcoming ambience. The air smelled of freshly ground beans. Over steaming cups of coffee, Lucas outlined a new tech initiative for local schools. Olivia found herself absorbed in the possibilities. His passion resonated with her own desire to make a tangible difference. Midway through discussing budgets, he paused. "You look tired," he observed softly. "Are you all right?" She hesitated, torn between honesty and the urge to shield herself. "I'm managing," she said again. He offered a faint nod, not pressing for details. They finished their discussion, and his handshake felt unexpectedly comforting. Returned to the office, Olivia realized she felt lighter. She wasn't sure why a stranger's concern mattered so much, but part of her was grateful not to carry her burden alone. That evening, she found Richard packing a suitcase. He claimed he needed space, leaving without further explanation. The quiet in the house felt oppressive, yet she welcomed reprieve from a contrite pleas. She reminded herself she deserved a fresh start, free from false promises. In the days that followed, she poured her energy into planning sessions and negotiations. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, she recalled Lucas's calm empathy. Though they barely knew each other, something about his demeanor hinted at a safe harbor. She brushed the thought aside, reminding herself her wounds were too raw for new attachments. Still, a faint hope glimmered. Each email from him carried a subtle reassurance. He never pried, never offered pity. Instead, he approached her with respect and a shared goal, improving lives through their philanthropic efforts. Late one night, she stood before her bedroom mirror, exhaustion etched into her features. The woman staring back seemed different, fragile, yet determined not to let heartbreak define her. She thought of Lucas's parting words at the cafe, his gentle offer of support, and felt something inside her soften. Yes, her marriage was ending and the future was daunting, but in the quiet darkness, she sensed she might eventually find a love that cherished her spirit instead of betraying it. For now, she would focus on forging ahead, grateful for any kindness that reminded her she was not alone in the storm. Unbeknownst to her, a deeper bond was already forming, a connection that promised to mend wounds, rebuild trust, and reignite hope. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, Olivia clung to the possibility that her story was far from over. A new chapter awaited, shaped by resilience, and by the unexpected compassion of a man who saw beyond her pain. 3 weeks passed in the blur of legal appointments and work demands. Olivia endured restless nights, haunted by the dissolution of her marriage and the sting of betrayal. Yet she pressed on, determined not to let heartbreak define her. Rumors of her impending divorce circulated, prompting sympathetic nods and intrusive questions. She maintained a firm exterior, seeking refuge in the philanthropic organization she helped guide. Janine shielded her from prying calls and ensured she ate at least one proper meal each day. In the midst of it all, Lucas Harrington's involvement grew. His tech initiative for local schools now required frequent collaboration with Olivia's team. Late emails, strategy calls, and quick updates had become the norm. Though they mostly spoke about budgets and timelines, his quiet empathy offered unexpected reassurance. One afternoon, they convened at a partly renovated community center, a test site for the upcoming technology rollout. The makeshift conference room hummed with tense debate. City officials argued over whether funds should go to urgent repairs or digital upgrades. Olivia tried to broker a compromise, but frayed nerves and personal stress nearly overwhelmed her. Lucas intervened, calmly outlining how enhanced technology could cut long-term costs and attract additional sponsors. Gradually, tensions eased and a tentative agreement emerged. As the meeting ended, Olivia lingered to finalize notes. When she stepped outside, Lucas was waiting near the entrance, tie loosened. "Impressive diplomacy in there," he remarked. "You handled it well." She managed a tired smile. "Thanks." It felt like herding cats. He hesitated, then nodded toward the street. "There's a coffee shop nearby. Want to debrief?" Though swamped with obligations, she agreed. They walked side by side, discussing next steps. Inside the cafe's warm interior, they settled at a small table. Lucas ordered 2 cappuccinos, glancing her way with concern. "You seem exhausted," he observed. "Are you all right?" She bristled at first, then softened under his genuine tone. "I'm coping," she said, voice subdued. "It's been a difficult time." He nodded, offering quiet reassurance, not pressing for details. They refocused on the project, budget allocations, potential donors, and a looming press release. Yet underneath the professional talk, Olivia sensed an unspoken understanding. For a moment, she felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. Her phone vibrated with Richard's ringtone, an unwelcome reminder of the life she was leaving behind. Anxiety clenched her chest, and she hastily silenced it. Noticing her distress, Lucas steered the conversation to lighter territory, sharing a humorous anecdote from an earlier project. She found herself smiling, however briefly. Eventually, she glanced at the time and rose to leave. "Thanks for this," she said softly. "Not just the coffee, but everything. I appreciate it." "Anytime," he replied, his gaze warm. "We'll tackle that press release soon." Driving home, Olivia listened to a voicemail from Richard. His voice teetered between remorse and anger, demanding another chance while accusing her of shutting him out. Her eyes burned with tears as she turned off the phone. She was too drained to argue. The divorce proceedings loomed, and she could hardly summon the energy for another confrontation. That night, she lay awake on the couch, the silence of the house closing in. Memories of happier days with Richard mingled with vivid recollections of his deceit. She felt torn between residual affection and the undeniable fact that he'd broken her trust. Sleep came late and fitful. Work beckoned early the next morning. She immersed herself in finalizing a new grant application, meeting with staff about upcoming events, and exchanging more emails with Lucas on a technology initiative. His messages were concise yet reassuring, each one a subtle reminder that someone respected her insights and cared enough to ask if she needed more time. During a brief lunch break, Janine cornered her. "You can't keep running on fumes," she warned gently. "Let me handle some of these tasks." Olivia sighed. "I know, but I need to stay busy. It's easier than facing everything at home." Janine's eyes shone with understanding. "Just promise you won't go through this alone." As the afternoon wore on, Olivia found her thoughts drifting back to her conversation with Lucas. She replayed his kind expressions, his willingness to notice her struggle without prying. For the first time since Richard's betrayal, she felt a fragile sense of comfort. Maybe she didn't have to be entirely alone in her pain. Still, she was far from ready to trust in the possibility of something new. The wounds were too fresh, and her life had turned into a tightrope walk between heartbreak and duty. Each day was a battle to maintain composure, to shield herself from further hurt. Yet she allowed a small corner of her heart to cling to the warmth Lucas provided. When she checked her phone again, Richard had left 3 more messages, each more urgent than the last. Tension seized her chest, and she forced herself to ignore them for now. She couldn't deal with his pleas and accusations when her emotional reserves were so depleted. The afternoon ended with a staff meeting to finalize details for a fundraising gala. Olivia guided the team with measured calm, carefully noting each assignment. Once everyone dispersed, she sank into her office chair, exhaustion pressing down. The sun had already dipped behind the skyline, painting the windows in shades of fading gold. Drawing a slow breath, she scanned her inbox. There was another email from Lucas, subject line, "Quick check-in." Inside, he thanked her for her insights earlier and asked if she needed anything before their next phase. The message was short, yet it brought a flicker of solace. Though they hardly knew each other outside work, he had offered her a rare sense of safety that her own marriage had failed to sustain. Logging off, Olivia gathered her things. She returned to an empty house. But somehow, that prospect no longer weighed as heavily. Yes, she was hurt, betrayed, and frightened of what lay ahead. Yet she also sensed that each day of standing on her own feet was fortifying her spirit. As she locked up her office, she allowed herself a fleeting hope. Maybe, somewhere beyond the legal documents and accusatory phone calls, she'd discover a life grounded in honesty and unwavering respect. And perhaps, if she dared open her heart again, she might find a love she deserved, a love that didn't require her to question her own worth. For now, she would keep moving forward, step by careful step, refusing to let regret or fear hold her back. The story wasn't over. Olivia Saunders had more strength in her than she realized, and each moment spent rebuilding her life was another thread weaving into a future she could, at last, begin to envision. The invitation for the charity gala arrived in a gold-trimmed envelope, a reminder that Olivia's philanthropic work demanded more than spreadsheets and phone calls. It required public appearances, too. She stared at the elegant script detailing the evening schedule, heart twisting at the prospect of facing acquaintances who knew fragments of her crumbling marriage. Yet the gala was crucial for funding a range of community programs. Olivia steeled herself to attend, determined not to let Richard's betrayal undermine the cause she believed in. Preparations consumed the following days. She worked with Janine to finalize seating charts, confirm speakers, and coordinate volunteers. Lucas Harrington offered additional sponsorship from his tech firm, quietly assuring Olivia he'd be there to support the organization, and, in his gentle way, her. They exchanged a flurry of messages confirming last-minute details, but each note held an undercurrent of warmth. Though she fought to keep her guard up, she found her spirits lifted every time his name appeared on her phone. On the evening of the gala, Olivia slipped into a midnight blue gown that draped elegantly over her figure. She examined her reflection in the mirror, noticing faint shadows beneath her eyes. Still, a flicker of determination sparked within her. Tonight, she would stand tall, proving, even if only to herself, that Richard's infidelity hadn't broken her beyond repair. The event hall sparkled with crystal chandeliers and meticulously arranged floral displays. Guests trickled in, dressed in tuxedos and evening gowns, laughter mingling with the soft strains of violin music. Olivia greeted donors and board members, shaking hands and offering gracious smiles. Though her nerves hummed, she reminded herself of the greater purpose at stake: raising funds for underprivileged communities and education. Half an hour into the gala, she felt a familiar tension brush the back of her neck. Turning, she spotted Richard near the entrance, looking polished in a tailored suit. Her pulse lurched as she realized he wasn't alone. The blonde woman from the restaurant clutched his arm possessively. Hushed murmurs spread among onlookers, and Olivia caught glimpses of pity in their eyes. She forced herself to breathe. This woman, Shayna, she recalled from the rumors, had brazenly stepped into her life like a thief in the night. Now they strolled into Olivia's event, heads held high. Richard locked eyes with Olivia but didn't approach, instead steering Shayna toward a champagne tray. Olivia's stomach churned. She couldn't decide if she was more furious or hurt. Suddenly, a reassuring presence materialized at her side. "Are you all right?" Lucas's voice was low, filled with concern. He'd arrived moments earlier, cutting a commanding figure in his sharp suit. She forced a thin smile. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "I just didn't expect him to bring her." Lucas's gaze flicked toward Richard and Shayna. He returned his attention to Olivia, his features set with quiet resolve. "You don't have to face them alone. I'll stay close if you need me." Before she could respond, a committee member beckoned Olivia to the stage for her opening remarks. She took a steadying breath and approached the microphone, ignoring the knot of tension in her stomach. As she spoke about the charity's mission, empowering communities through technology and essential resources, her passion steadied her voice. Polite applause followed, and she stepped down to mingle with donors. During a lull, Richard approached, leaving Shayna behind at the bar. He wore a faint smile that felt more like a sneer. "You look well," he said, his tone guarded. "Quite a crowd here tonight." "Thank you," she replied, refusing to let him see how rattled she felt. "It's for a worthy cause." He cleared his throat. Shayna insisted on coming. She wanted to see the philanthropic scene in person. His eyes flickered with uncertainty, as though gauging Olivia's reaction. She held her chin high, her voice cool. "I hope she finds enlightening." Silence stretched, charged with old hurts. Before either could speak again, Lucas materialized Olivia's elbow, his calm presence a shield. "Olivia, the auction coordinator has a few questions," he said smoothly. Though he addressed her, his gaze settled on Richard, an unmistakable note of warning there. Richard's jaw tightened. "I'll let you get back to it," he muttered, stepping away. Lucas gently guided Olivia across the room, and she exhaled a shaky breath. "Thank you," she murmured, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I hate that he showed up with her." Lucas's gaze softened. "You're handling it far better than most would. If you need a moment, I can cover for you." She shook her head. "I'm okay. The cause comes first." The rest of the evening passed in a haze of polite small talk, bidding wars at the auction tables, and countless introductions. Despite her composure, Olivia's composure frayed whenever she glimpsed Richard and Shayna schmoozing with donors. Yet each time she felt herself falter, Lucas seemed to appear with a quiet question or gentle nudge to steer her forward. When the final auction item sold at a generous price, applause rippled through the crowd. The gala had been a success, raising more funds than projected. Near the exit, Shayna clung to Richard's arm as they departed. Olivia watched them go, an odd mixture of relief and lingering pain roiling inside her. At the end of the night, Lucas found her beside a grand staircase, her posture sagging with exhaustion. "Congratulations," he said softly. "Your event was a triumph." She mustered a weary smile. "I couldn't have done it without the whole team." Lucas hesitated, then took a small step closer. "That may be true, but it was your leadership that made tonight possible." Their eyes met in a moment of understanding that sent a surge of warmth through her. For the first time all evening, she allowed herself to exhale fully. The gala had revealed just how raw her wounds still were, but it also shown her a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone in this battle. "Thank you," she whispered, voice unsteady. As she gazed into Lucas's steady eyes, she felt something shift inside, a cautious whisper of possibility, that perhaps not all men would betray her trust. Perhaps a safer, kinder future was within reach, if only she dared to embrace it. 1 week after the gala, the buzz surrounding Richard's brazen appearance with Shayna refused to die down. Donors, board members, and acquaintances kept dropping pointed hints in emails and phone calls, feigning concern about Olivia's well-being. She tried her best to remain poised, pouring her energy into the digital literacy campaign she and Lucas were championing for local schools. Each new milestone offered a welcome distraction from the turmoil in her personal life, yet the tension was inescapable. Every time her phone buzzed, Olivia steeled herself for more reminders of Richard's betrayal. Some messages came from well-meaning friends, urging her to stay strong. Others came from Richard himself, alternating between pleas for another chance and bitter accusations that she'd turned everyone against him. She deleted his voicemails without listening, unwilling to tumble into another spiral of hurt. One evening, after a productive meeting on the campaign's funding strategy, she lingered at her office desk. Janine had left earlier, insisting Olivia should take the night off. But work felt safer than an empty house haunted by memories. A quiet calm settled over the building, broken only by the low hum of computers. Suddenly, the phone rang. Expecting a late-night question from Lucas or a staffer, she picked up without checking the caller ID. Richard's voice greeted her instead, taut and desperate. "Olivia, please. We need to talk." She fought the instinct to hang up. "We've talked enough, Richard," she said, struggling to keep her composure. "I'm exhausted by all of this." He sighed heavily. "I know I messed up, but can we meet? Just once, face to face. No lawyers." Her stomach nodded. Part of her wanted to refuse outright. Another part, fueled by residual affection and a need for closure, wavered. "Fine," she whispered. "Tomorrow at noon, the cafe near my office." Her nerves fizzed the next morning, a mixture of dread and vague resolve. Lucas noticed her anxious state during a quick project briefing. "You're quiet today," he observed. "Everything okay?" She hesitated. "I'm meeting Richard later. Against my better judgment, maybe." He nodded thoughtfully, concern flickering in his eyes. "I won't pry, but if you need anything afterward, just let me know." At noon, Olivia found herself seated at a small table in the cafe, the same one where she and Lucas had once discussed budgets over cappuccinos. Now, an uneasy hush replaced that previous warmth. Richard arrived a few minutes late, looking tired, dark circles rimming his eyes. She couldn't help noting how different he seemed from the confident man who used to fill their home with easy laughter. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, settling into the seat. He fiddled with his cufflinks, nervous energy radiating from him. She clasped her hands to keep them from shaking. "Make it quick, Richard. What do you want?" "I messed up," he said, voice low. "I shouldn't have brought Shayna to the gala. It was wrong and cruel. I'm sorry." A bitter laugh escaped Olivia's lips. "Do you think that's what bothers me most? Your affair has destroyed any trust one had left. Seeing you flaunt it was just another stab." He winced. "I know, but I need you to believe I never intended to hurt you like this." Everything spiraled out of control. She studied him, remembering the man who had once been her partner, her confidant. That man felt like a distant memory now. "So, why are we here?" Richard hesitated, glancing at the table as though searching for the right words. "I want to fix things. I told Shayna it's over. It was a mistake. She was a mistake. I want to try again. We can go to counseling, start fresh." Anger flared in Olivia's chest. You want a clean slate after months of deceit? Do you think we can wave a magic wand and everything goes back to normal? His face twisted with regret. I'll do whatever it takes. She inhaled sharply, tears stinging her eyes. There's no going back, Richard. I'm not the same person I was before you lied to me. Maybe a part of me will always care about the man I once loved, but that man doesn't exist anymore. Silence hung, thick with finality. At last, Richard nodded, eyes rimmed with moisture. I understand, he said quietly. If you ever change your mind. I won't, Olivia cut in, rising from her chair. I hope you find peace, but I can't keep living in your shadow. She left the cafe, heart hammering, tears threatening to fall. The meeting had been more painful than she'd imagined, yet it also felt like a necessary turning point. As she walked back to her office, she replayed the conversation in her mind, unsure whether to sob or scream. Lucas was waiting by her desk, discussing a project detail with Janine. When he saw Olivia's stricken expression, his voice softened. Everything all right? She managed a nod, though her throat felt tight. I'm not sure yet, she admitted, but I think I'm done looking back. Janine discreetly excused herself, leaving them alone. Lucas reached out, gently resting a hand on Olivia's shoulder. The simple gesture offered more comfort than any apology Richard had ever voiced. She closed her eyes, letting relief wash over her. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me space to figure this out, and for stepping in when I need support. Lucas's gaze was warm. I meant what I said. I'm here if you need me. No pressure, no expectations. Olivia felt a fragile ray of optimism pierce her grief. She confronted Richard and chosen her own path, one that no longer bowed to betrayal. Though her heart still ached, she sensed a faint glow of something new forming in the wake of heartbreak. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust again if she allowed herself to heal and lean on those who truly cared. Leaving the office later that evening, she walked into the cool air with a steadier step. She might have lost the security of her old life, but she had gained a newfound resolve. With each breath, she reminded herself she deserved honesty, loyalty, and the freedom to embrace hope. And though the journey ahead remained uncertain, she was certain of one thing. She was done living in Richard's shadow. The day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new Digital Learning Center arrived under a bright, cloudless sky. Olivia stood outside the freshly painted school building, heart pounding as she prepared to greet local officials and the press. It was a culmination of months of tireless work. Her philanthropic organization, in partnership with Lucas Harrington's tech firm, had pulled every string to make this dream a reality for underprivileged students. Today's event signified not just a community milestone, but also a personal triumph over the shadows of her past. Janine hovered close by, offering Olivia an encouraging smile. You look wonderful, she whispered, adjusting the lapel of Olivia's blazer. Ready to go? Olivia inhaled sharply. Ready as I'll ever be. She could hardly believe how far she'd come since discovering Richard's affair. The bruises on her heart still ached at times, but each new achievement, professional or personal, reminded her she had the strength to rise above betrayal. The ceremony began with a short speech from the school principal, followed by a heartfelt address from a local council member. Then Lucas stepped up to the podium, his confident presence radiating across the crowd. He spoke passionately about the importance of digital inclusion, emphasizing how every child deserved a fair shot at modern education. Though his words focused on the program, his gaze occasionally flicked toward Olivia with a quiet warmth that steadied her nerves. When it was finally her turn to speak, Olivia walked forward, heart hammering. She thanked the donors, the school officials, and Lucas's tech team for their unwavering commitment. She even managed a poised smile as she recounted the project's humble beginnings. Applause followed, cameras flashed, and the symbolic ribbon fluttered the ground under ceremonial scissors. Students cheered at the thought of their soon-to-be upgraded classrooms. After the ceremony, reporters gathered for quick interviews. Olivia answered questions about future expansions and funding sources, while Lucas handled the more technical queries. Surging relief and pride swelled within her. For the first time in ages, she sensed her life was firmly on an upward trajectory. Then, Through the throng of faces, she spotted a jarring sight. Richard, hovering at the edge of the crowd, looking tense and agitated. Her stomach lurched. She insisted on no contact after their last cafe meeting, but apparently he had other ideas. As she excused herself from a reporter, she saw Shayna lingering behind him, arms crossed. Olivia's chest tightened. Why had they come here? Before she could decide whether to confront them or leave, Richard stormed forward. "Olivia," he barked, voice low but urgent. "We need to talk." She stiffened. "This is not the time or place." Anger flashed in his eyes. "You've ignored all my calls. I won't be brushed aside like some stranger." She swallowed, struggling to remain calm. "Richard, this is a public event for the community. Please don't cause a scene." He scoffed, glancing around at the attendees. "I see Harrington is here," he sneered, voice dripping with bitterness. "Your new ally, right?" Her lips parted, but before she could reply, Shayna stepped up beside Richard. "We have something to discuss," she snapped, glaring. "You can't keep burying your head in the sand." Confusion churned in Olivia's chest. "What are you talking about?" Shayna turned her phone toward Olivia, displaying a string of text messages. "Your lawyer sent more legal documents to Richard. They say you plan on taking a larger share of the estate than we agreed to. If you think we'll stand by and let you ruin our finances." A rush of indignation spiked through Olivia. "Those documents are standard procedure. I'm entitled to what the law grants me." Richard opened his mouth to retort, but a firm hand landed on his shoulder. Lucas had arrived, a protective calm emanating from him. "This conversation is inappropriate right now," he said quietly, though his tone left no room for argument. "Please step away from the event if you want to argue." Shayna stared daggers. "Who are you to get involved?" "I'm ensuring the celebration isn't tarnished by private disputes," he returned smoothly. "You're free to discuss legal matters through proper channels." Richard looked ready to explode, but the stern lines of Lucas's expression made him pause. Muttering something unintelligible, he grabbed Shayna's arm and pulled her away. Onlookers, curious but polite, pretended not to notice the confrontation. Olivia exhaled, her pulse thrumming in her ears. "Thank you," she managed, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want that drama here." Lucas gave her a reassuring nod. "I'm sorry you had to deal with them. Are you all right?" She swallowed hard. "I will be." Despite the tense interruption, the day continued on a positive note. Students toured the new computer lab, testing devices that would soon revolutionize their studies. The media took photos of smiling children and proud donors. By late afternoon, the guests filtered out, and Olivia found herself leaning against a hallway wall, finally able to process what had happened. Lucas appeared at her side, quiet concern etched into his features. "You sure you're okay?" he asked gently, offering her a bottle of water. She accepted it with a shaky laugh. "I'm more than okay. I'm relieved. Even if Richard and Shayna keep trying to drag me into their mess, I see now that their drama doesn't define me." He nodded, slipping his hands into his pockets. "No, it doesn't. You've come a long way." Her gaze drifted down the hall, where happy voices of students still floated on the air. "They can't take this away from me, any of it," she murmured, tears threatening. "I built something I'm proud of." His eyes warmed. "And you did it on your own terms." Her breath caught. Slowly, she reached for his hand, a tentative gesture brimming with unspoken trust. "Lucas, I don't know where my life will lead from here, but I do know I want to keep moving forward. And maybe, if you're willing, I'd like you to be part of that journey." His smile was gentle yet exultant. "I'd like that, too." Standing there in the hushed school hallway, hand in hand, they shared a quiet moment of understanding. After the heartbreak and betrayals, after the scandals and legal battles, they had both arrived at a place of honesty and genuine care. The seeds of true affection had taken root, nourished by respect and shared purpose. Later, as they walked out into the waning sunlight, Olivia felt the tight knot in her chest finally loosen. She was free of Richard's lies, free to embrace the future on her own terms. And as Lucas's fingers laced with hers, She allowed herself to believe that a love defined by trust and kindness was no longer a distant dream. It was right here, growing stronger with every beat of her newly unburdened heart. The end. Enjoyed the story? We invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue bringing more beautiful stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your effort. See you again.